welcome to what I think is a really exciting professional development series that we're launching today. I'm so pleased to see all of you join us. We had just shy of 70 math faculty from across the Nevada system of higher education and our institutions respond and register for this. We recognize, of course, that there are certainly well more than 70 or so faculty within the system in math. And so we are recording this session for our colleagues who are not able to join us in this live synchronous experience today. And we'll record all of the sessions actually moving forward. And again, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule amidst the daily lives of our chaotic nation and world today even to participate in this session. My name is James McCoy. I serve as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Success with the Nevada System of Higher Education and the Director of Corequisite Math and English Implementation. Previous to my role at INSHE, I had the opportunity to serve in a variety of roles at the College of Southern Nevada, first as a communication faculty member, department chair, and then moving into academic leadership roles. But in my role today, I'm really excited to support the Nevada System of Higher Education Corequisite Implementation Task Force. You're going to hear all about the work of the task force today. Our goal today is to provide sort of an overview of the work of the task force, and you'll hear directly from our task force members in that regard. Before I get any further, I do want to pay a very special acknowledgement to the ECMC Foundation, to Strong Start to Finish, for both providing some very generous grants to support our professional development series, of which today is one of them, particularly for you. And as you also probably know, through the generous support of ECMC Foundation and Strong Start to Finish, much institutional sub-grant dollars have come to each institution to support the implementation of our COREC work. So we're really, really pleased for the partnership with both ECMC and Strong Start. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank Complete College America. They have been a partner in Nevada for well over a decade, and they have stepped up and are leading the project management of our professional development series. You'll hear more from Complete College America in just a moment. I'd like to pay a very special thank you to the INSHE Corequisite Implementation Action Team, the task force. This is a group that has been heavily involved in this work for well over a year. Some have been involved in this work for years before that in preparation for what we're experiencing today around remediation reform and the implementation of this statewide policy per the Board of Regents. And so you'll hear much more about the work of the task force, who our members are, and what they've been able to accomplish in what I think is a relatively short period of time. I'd also like to acknowledge very specifically three members from our Math Implementation Task Force team, they being Ann Flesher, Patrick Villa, and Gino Jung. The three of these folks, familiar names to many of you, not only serve on the INSHE COREC Implementation Task Force, but they also make up the subcommittee for professional development for math faculty in this regard. And so they have put together today's session, and they have put together the content for the sessions to come between now and April. So many, many thanks to Ann, Patrick, and Gino for your extra commitment in that work. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nia Hadel from Complete College America. She serves as the Vice President for Alliance Engagement and Institutional Transformation. So Nia, we'd like to turn the floor over to you for a couple of opening remarks.
Thank you, James. So I wanted to say that just to begin, I'm very excited to be able to be here with you all today, and just excited to continue to work with Nevada, and because you all are doing some really great things, and we really appreciate the partnership that we've had with Nevada over the last couple of years. So I just want to tell you a little bit about Complete College America, just in case you're not familiar with who we are. And our mission is really that we are a bold national advocate, and so our goal is to focus on increasing college completion rates and closing equity gaps. And I want to focus a little bit on this part right here, the completion of the closing of the equity gaps, because historically what we have, the national conversation around the disparity in education has often focused around where the students falling short. But when we talk about closing equity gaps, we're really talking about where in our systems are there structural barriers that have really continue to provide barriers for students. And so that's why the work that you all are doing with co-requisite support is so critical, because we know that that is one of the research shows that is one of the areas that we have the most disparity. And so working on this particularly is really going to assist with that. Our vision is that everyone who wants to have a credential of value should be able to participate and be successful in that endeavor. And so we are looking for ways to partner with systems and institutions to be able to create environments and the conditions that really support students for on-time completion. And when we talk about on-time completion, that doesn't always mean just 4 years or 2 years. It is on time based on the student's individual plan and what they are trying to accomplish. And we know that this may look very different for different students, but just trying to figure out how do we work with these different stakeholders to make sure that we're creating a situation where students can achieve. We've done this in a number of different ways. We really are focused on data, and this has been a great, again, partnership with James and with Nevada. This is just the way that we do our work. So we're focused on policy, conditions, and strategy. And last week during CCA week, we unveiled our new strategic pillars, or our refined approach to doing the work. And with policy, we're working across the Alliance, which Nevada is an Alliance member, to advocate for different policy changes using data to inform our practices. With the conditions, working with our partners on developing workshops, and whether it's coaching and support and events that allow us to assist in sharing information. And then our strategies focus on how do we really figure out exactly what the issues are in various areas using the data that we've collected, and then planning on being strategic interventions on how we want to move forward. And so the work that we do, this is how we do the work. We use the Alliance to focus to actually improve our college completion. The end goal is for us is always looking through an equity lens. So how are we making sure that the students who are most minoritized, and oftentimes that is not only students of color, but students who come from low-income families, as well as adult learners. And how do we make sure that we're shaping our policies and practices to support them? And the ultimate goal is social mobility, economic opportunity, and racial justice. So our network, our alliances, so these are all the people who help us do our work. And we are excited that again, you all have been a very influential partner with us over the last few years. So I just wanted to make sure that people who haven't interacted with us know that we are, at CCA, we're here to support the work that you're doing. So anything that we can do to help facilitate the good work that you're doing, then we would just love to be a part of that project. And so the next part is that you'll get to hear from members of the task force into what the work is going to be and the project moving forward over the next couple of months. Our two presenters for today, one is Ann Flesher, and she's the Interim Dean of Math and Physical Sciences at TMCC, and she was previously the Vice Chair of the department, and she's been on the task force since the very beginning. I'm telling you stuff that you probably already know, but she's fabulous, and she's been working on this from the very beginning. And then we have Patrick Villa, who is the department chair. He was the department chair for 6 years at CSN, and so now he's a faculty member, and he's been on the task force from the very beginning as well. When Corequisite support was just beginning to be a concept. And so Patrick is going to lead us off in our next portion of our discussion. Patrick?
Okay, thank you, Nia. Thank you, James. Everybody hear me okay? Good, thank you. Okay, so as they've mentioned, our task force has been working for a while on this. I'm going to share my screen so you can kind of see the stuff that we're going to talk about, Ann and myself. And then we're just going to go through here, kind of give you an overview of what has happened, why it's happened, what we're working on, what we've accomplished, what we're having trouble with, et cetera. Just the whole picture of what's been going on with COREC in Nevada. And then hopefully, depends on how long Ann and I talk, which we do a lot of. So if we have time, we're hoping to get some questions in there as well for you all. So let me make sure. All right. My screen showing up. You should see the NG COREC implementation task force slide, I'm hoping. I lost all my chat stuff, so I'm just going by what you guys have. Okay, so for the most part, as everyone's mentioned, this is what we're at, and I know most of you probably already know what's going on, the basics of it, but I'm going to talk as if you didn't know, just in case there's something that you weren't sure of. Um, Basically, the membership, we have the three of us presenting, but here's the main membership of this Math Correct Task Force Committee. We have essentially one faculty member from every one of the seven colleges. And we are 1/4 of the entire state task force. There's 7 of us, there's 7 English faculty, there are 7 counselors, there are 7 admin type people. And that's like the big committee, the big group that is working on all this to make sure it's implemented correctly along, through all 7 colleges. We've started, back, over a year ago, we were trying to meet once a month. Like we would fly up to Reno. We had a couple of meetings up there. We were going to have a couple of meetings down in Las Vegas, but COVID hit. So we've been sort of meeting remotely or working individually, but it's been getting done. So again, here's the list. I don't need to read everybody out, but we have all of us. And then the main charge, as you may recall, the board passed a couple of changes, and the main stuff, if you need to see it, I can pull it up, but the board basically said, okay, we're going to change a few things, such as we're going to dump all of the lower level math and English. So no more under 100 level courses starting in the fall of 21. And they are encouraging us to come up with co-rec courses, the big thing that's coming around the whole country, essentially embedding the material into the main course. For us, for math, we're talking math 120, 124, 126. And big change is happening. And of course, the other fun part is they want students to finish these within their first couple of semesters of starting the college, whatever college they go to. Our focus has been just trying to get the logistics of these courses down, trying to come up with some, something to make this work. And when this began a year ago, there are some colleges who've been doing this for a couple of years already. Some have never had a sniff of it. So, we're all at different levels. But we've come together, the 7 of us and then some. We've worked well over the last year, and we've been collaborating, trying to find out what works, doesn't work. We're trying to, as we pass, we have an implementation plan that the board has mostly approved. They have one more part they need to approve coming up. So we're trying to satisfy what the board wants, and we're at the same time trying to give the individual institutions some choice, some way to kind of do things the way they want. But there are constrictions. There are things that we have to do. A couple of things we're going to cover shortly in this, but for the most part, the board wants it to be semi-consistent, as consistent as possible. So we're working on trying to make sure we do that. We're talking about credits. We're talking about placement, assessment, everything that's involved with these courses. So at this point, most of us have been starting that, trying it out. We've been running pilots. But again, the big thing is a year from now in the fall, we have to all be full implementation. No more 96, no more 95. If you were doing 93, all those are gone as of the fall of 21. And hopefully a big, increase in enrollment for all these co-rec classes that we have. So the policy, and I'll pull this up real quick. This is, a quick look at this. Like I said, I'll let you guys, if you want to go look at the board policy. It's the specifics of this is what we're bound to. This is what we're trying to make sure that we follow when we're doing everything. And this is our implementation plan, which I know many of you have seen, which is basically just talking about all the things. And this is a lot of what Ann and I are going to talk about today. And in terms of that, in addition to that, we're also going to talk about the new thing that we are excited and we've been working on, which is the professional development series that we're trying to do. And the whole point of this is, and I know you're all probably sick of it, just like I am. We're not at the point where we're trying to sell you all. We're not trying to say this is good, this is why we need to do it. We're hopefully all past that, and we're at the point of, okay, this is happening, this has happened. Now let's try to get the best product for our students. Let's try to get, these courses to be as efficient and great as they can be. And that's what a lot of these professional developments are going to be. And we'll show that in a little bit, go summarize what's coming up the next year. But it's all about trying to get all 7 of our institutions in the best, taking the best step forward here. So that's pretty much it for the first part here. And we're going to have questions at the end, I'm sure, here. I'm going to pass it over to Ann. I got to make sure I unmute her. And she's going to talk a little bit more on the next phase of this. Anne, are you able to? I lost
Yeah,
you.
can you all hear me?
There you go. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, James. Thank you, Nia, for your involvement in this. So yeah, Patrick gave a little overview of kind of the charge of the task force and what we tried to come together on, trying to also keep in mind and be very cognizant of institutional flexibility and institutional needs throughout the system. So the beginnings, and many of you probably know this, if you're a math faculty in here, we kind of tackled the low hanging fruit. I think every institution, is running a Math 120 plus 20 or a Math 120E pilot this year, ready for full implementation. It was, like I said, kind of the low hanging fruit. It was the easier class for us to wrap our heads around. It's essentially thought of as math for liberal arts, although that's somewhat of a misnomer because it does satisfy other degree requirements, but that's what we consider it. And so that was the easier one to tackle because it is a terminal math class, although it does lead to downstream programs. So what we have for you, for those attending, and by the way, it's really good to see a lot of you, and thank you all very much for attending today's overview and kickoff. We hope to make the professional development series really about faculty and faculty needs, or the math faculty needs. So everyone's running their pilots, and here are the credits of support. So whether they're embedded, whether it's a paired class, we kind of broke that down so people could see what the other institutions are doing. The other pathway that we worked on this year is the STEM pathway. Some institutions are running this right now, and I should note, we came together and agreed, and it took a little while, that both of these pathways and both these course structures for 120 plus 20 and 126 plus 26 are open pathways. There are no prerequisites for students to get into these classes. Now, if they're college ready by the policy, they can go right into Math 120 or 126. And if they don't meet the college ready requirements, they will have to also co-enroll with support or take the 120E class with the embedded support. The community of colleges just recently came together that 126 will have 3 credits of support and be an open pathway at all institutions, and the universities are running them at 2 credits of support. Due to the funding formula, the community colleges worked really hard to come together on the support. And we, after a year, we'll look at what was best, what was needed. We don't really know because it's brand new to all of us. So we're trying our best. And I almost think of fall 2021 as full implementation, but true pilot year. Really, what are we going to look at after a year and see what works, what doesn't? So there are 2 other pathways that still need tackling. Don't go to the next page yet. Go back up to page 2. Thank you, Patrick. The business pathway. So students that are pursuing a business degree, it turns out there are inconsistencies across the system on what would be the required math class. Some have 126, some have Math 124. So it turns out in looking at this, and we had to keep kind of looking that there's some issues with the transfer, what the universities are doing downstream. So they're going to look at their programs, and the community colleges can build our program requirements under there. But that's still to be worked out. And as well with I have a typo, the health science degree. The health science degree at this point is looking like 126, but these conversations are still happening. So the pathways for these 2 programs are not in the next action plan, which is going to the board in September, but are going to the board in June. So we have a little bit of time to kind of work out what those pathways will look like. And we also decided that there is not going to be a STAT pathway at this time. There was a lot of conversation about that. I know California that had to institute AB 705 has a strong STAT pathway, but there wasn't a high demand for that. So at this point, schools are open to it, but there wasn't enough demand to tackle that as a kind of a system-wide approach. These are the 4 pathways we tried to tackle from a collective system approach. So there's where all the institutions landed. And then you can scroll up, Patrick. We also, within the first action plan, had to report on what our common themes are and assessment. There's a much more robust assessment plan coming, but we really, when we talk about assessment, it was sort of an alignment of some student learning outcomes. And actually, this was really easy. Oh, my light just went out. What ended up happening is when we all put in for our courses, when we put in our course objectives and our student learning outcomes, naturally, a number of common themes and what we assess just rose to the surface. So this was actually not a big conversation to tackle. Really, there were some common threads already across all of our curriculum. And we as institutions agreed that we already have pretty elaborate established assessment cycles and assessment processes within our institutions that we have to follow. But we also agreed that we all know, being involved in assessment, those ground level closing of the loop discussions are so important. So we agreed as a task force to also come back together and talk about that, to see where we land and see what changes might need to be made moving forward. And then I'm going to kick it back to Patrick, because we also had to come together on a few other things, and placement was one of them. So I'll kick it back to him and he can talk about that.
So yeah, as Ann mentioned, it's and I said this earlier, a lot of what the board wants is they want consistency, across all the colleges. And one of the first challenges, not first, but one of the challenges that we had was they wanted us to have same placement test cutoff scores. Okay, and as you all know, some of you have been using AccuPlacer, or we're using Alex, or whatever you have, SATs, ACTs, and we, for example, have been using them for many years. We've kind of tweaked the scores here and there based on certain things, but they wanted it more standardized. They wanted it to be the same. So the kind of the rule was, if it's a standardized test like an SAT, they want the same placement to be at all the colleges in NCHI here. So it doesn't sound like that would be difficult, but that was a big challenge, as you might guess, because some places were 30, 40 points higher on the SAT, some were a lot less. And as you all know, as faculty members, nobody wants to go lower in standards, but it's also kind of difficult to raise them up. So it's not an easy fix, but we came together, we kind of came up with ranges, exact numbers, and we were able to kind of, work through that. And we made common cut scores for all these. And again, if you're not using, a lot of this, we're talking now for just regular gateway courses, since all the CoRec ones are pretty much open enrollment, it doesn't really apply. But the remaining regular 126, regular 124, 181, all those courses, that's the ones we needed to also get in some sort of alignment here. And again, if your college is not using one of those systems, if you're not using AccuPlacer, then it really didn't matter to you too much. But we tried to make it where no one college was making it too easy or too difficult on their students, and we feel we got there. And that's so that's something positive. I'll at least say that we had success there. So that, like I said, I think we're done with that part on the placements. It's like Ann said, though, everything is an ongoing assessment of ourselves. That's kind of what our goal is. That we're setting these pilots in motion, we're setting these placement test scores to a certain number, and we're designing the courses like the 3+2, the 3+3, and we may all realize we recognize that we may be wrong. We're just going by other people's best practices or what we feel is good. But we may find out later on, our placement test scores are wrong, or our, units was too much or not enough. And that's part of this living process, is we're going to go back and fix things if need be. And that's where a lot of the assessment comes in, and maybe not even assessment, but just conversation. Talk with us, talk with your department, talk with everybody. If you're starting to see problems, that are going on, let us know. And that's where this is going to get fixed at this level with our task force. So again, that's pretty much for placement. For pilots, course design, and again, we're all at different levels here, but we're trying to all get, at the same point in time, same place on the track here. We're doing the 120 plus 20. And again, this is already one difference, that we at CSN used to have it as a 90, 92. That was our general catch-all course for the support section. Some other places had another number, and we were all over the board. And then we decided, let's just make these new courses. So that's why we have that 20, 24, and 26, where students will be enrolled in that. That's a 1 or a 2 or a 3 credit course. And a lot of people will ask this, and I'll try to answer this now. Why didn't we just make it a 6 credit 126E? Why didn't we just make it a 5 credit? And a lot of that has to do with the funding of the four-year institutions, where they don't get funding for the lower stuff, so they have to make this separated. And it's more for bookkeeping purposes. I mean, that's not the only reason, but that's the main part. We want to make sure our instructors get paid for 4, 5, 6 credits of teaching, and the students are paying the appropriate fees. And this is the way that seems to work for everybody. So when you see that 20, 24, and 26, those are just the support courses that go along with everything there. Okay, if you didn't know that already. So again, we've got, we're going to have that a professional development session in February, as it says here. And we're going to talk more about this. And again, it's going to be the faculty. It's going to be people from other institutions who have been doing this for years, just to try to see if this is what's working, how it's going to go. But we feel that's the right path. But they're going to share the classroom stuff. They're going to talk about how they teach it and what they do. And I know a number of people went to Citrus College back, I can't remember when, a year ago, give or take. And a lot of people came back very encouraged by what they saw, because a lot of us were hesitant. We didn't know how you're going to put a kid who can't combine 2 negative numbers into a 126 course. But there are some positive end results there. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is get to that point where we can instruct those people in a 6 credit, 1 semester course and get them through what matters, the 126, get them ready for 127. So lots of pilots are happening right now. We're all trying different things. Some people have it where the course is independent and it has a separate grade. Some people have it as a dependent grade. Some people have 1 instructor, 2 instructors, a team. There's a lot of things we're working on. And the hope is that we come together soon and realize, okay, as a state, this is working great. Let's all try to do this. Or maybe yours is working good. Keep doing that. But that's that first bullet there. That's the main setup of what we're doing. And we're going to highlight that a lot more in that February professional development session. So same thing with the scheduling. And I kind of already talked about this here, the mixed separate cohorts, paired sections, 1 instructor, that's part of the design. It's a bigger thing than a lot of you think. A lot of us just teach, but when you have to make the schedule, when you have to get part-timers, when we have part-timers who are no longer qualified to teach a 100-level course, there's a lot of things in play here. So the scheduling aspect is a big one, and we're working to get that good is the plan here. So last one is the assessment, and in that particular case, so in that case, we are going to try to just come up with something in. We've all been assessing. That's our big A word that we've been doing the last few years. And so we're not going to change too much on that, but we are going to be specific to make sure that it's working here for this stuff, for these new courses, because that is really one of our main guides is, how's it working? And the assessment is one of the many factors we're going to take into consideration in deciding if it's working or we need to make some changes here. So in that end, I think that's everything for the pilots and the course design. I'll kick it back to Ann and we'll talk more about the identified areas of need here.
Nice. Thank you. And I just want to make one correction. Sorry, Patrick. We only have to come together on placements for the gateway classes, the 100 level. Above 126, institutions are still setting their own placements. And another thing that should be noted is that the NSHE College Ready policy already outlines levels of ACT, and the high school multiple measure sort of what I want to say, placement into 100 level already. So GPA, if you earned a A or B in your last math class in high school, that makes you also college ready already, and you don't have to take support. So it's only the gateway classes that the task force, along with soliciting, feedback had to come to alignment on. But I also should note that a number of institutions are also doing their own kind of homegrown internal tests or other internal tools. It's only on the standardized, nationally recognized placement tools that we wanted to come together on common placements into our 100 level gateway classes. And so as we went through this whole process, I can't believe it's been a year since we all started. There were so many areas of need. And one of them that came to light was professional development on this. This kind of started from a number of us that went to the California Acceleration Project a year ago, went to Citrus College, realizing we needed more support in what we're doing. And I have to thank James because he really heard us. And so he went out and did a bunch of research on different areas that could provide us various support. He brought in support, I think in Theo Meek too, and Crystal Ava. They brought in support when the task force met pre-COVID, brought people in from the Dana Center. And so as we went through and discussing areas of professional development, we went back and got feedback from our institutional task force and from our faculty. And then we all got together again and said, yeah, we do want some external people. Here's the areas of need. We have areas of need of course design and in pedagogy and in pathways and in placement, active learning techniques, all of this. But then we also discussed how great it was when we actually all got together. And so that's where some of the professional development series is going to highlight the work that faculty already are doing at these institutions, a nice sharing activity, as well as looking at different course designs. And unless we get together and do that, we just don't have a chance. So a couple of the professional developments are just internal faculty presenting what they're doing at their institutions. And I'm really excited about this series. We also looked at, we had to submit our fiscal impact reports. And I know James is looking at that with what are our staffing shortages, what to do about faculty credentialing. And then obviously the big one that came up from the beginning was funding. And again, I want to thank James and Theo Meek, who's not here, and Crystal Abba for going out and finding us money and finding us grants. The board approved use of the NV Energy incentive money directly to Corequisite. I think that was at the June meeting a while ago. I can't remember when it was. And then we have the Strong Start to Finish and the ECMC funding, which is helping to supply this professional development series as long as institutions are using it for various needs. There are advising needs, there are enrollment enforcement issues, and there is, still communication plans being worked out. And all that is being worked out by the other task force. And there is toolkits coming and advising toolkits coming. So it really kind of shows you that it takes a whole village to run this implementation. But the professional development series and why you all are here today is really focused on math and Corequisite math implementation. And so I just want to highlight some of the things coming up in the series. And then we have a lot of time for some questions and answers. And we want to hear from you guys about what questions you might have and what we can answer at this point. So coming up, and it was a tight time to schedule it, but coming up in November, in the afternoon on Monday the 23rd and Tuesday the 24th, we're going to have a presentation on Corequisite math pedagogy. And I'm very excited about this one because there is a woman coming from Citrus College who was one of the leads in implementing pre-calculus with support. And I actually got to visit that campus and see what they're doing. And she's coming to talk about that. She's also a part of the California Acceleration Project. So she's going to come talk about math pedagogy. In addition, there is another woman from the Dana Center who's also been math faculty to talk really about course design. And we got to meet with both of them earlier this week. And they really wanted to hear about what's happening in Nevada, what's happening at our institutions, where are we at? So they're not just going to come in and tell you, here's my standard presentation. They really listened to what was happening within our institutions and what we're doing and where our action plans are at, and they're tailoring the presentation to NSHE. In addition, on Tuesday, methodology of placement, we have a woman coming in from the Community College Research Center. And there's a lot of research out there on, what's the optimal placement. I feel like it's the unknown question we all want to know. So I'm really also excited about this presentation because these might answer some questions that are on all our minds as we implement this. Is what's optimal placement? How do we get our students in? How do we get them into the right class? How do we get them successful in the subsequent class, into their downstream programs, and ultimately graduating with their degrees? And then we take a little break, and there won't be any in December and January, and then we'll come back and we have a couple in February. Very excited for the February 12th one, sort of the institutional internal presentations about what people are doing and sharing. And then again, we just kind of went through and looked at some needs in terms of implementing this for math. And then the last wrap up one in April is kind of when we get to all come back together again. So in developing these, James, like I said, went out and gathered some information. We went to faculty, talked about what our needs were. The task force kind of hammered these out a little bit more. And then Gino from GBC and myself and Patrick and James sat down, and we ended up taking all of that feedback and kind of developing this series. We brought it back to the task force, and they gave a thumbs up. And they also talked about more need for internal faculty to do the presentation. So we share more with each other, bringing back that collaborative effort. And yeah, this is where we landed. So this is kind of the kickoff, what's been done, what's still to be done. And I just want to open it up for questions and give a little reminder that after today's presentation, you'll get a link to a survey with a few questions on feedback. And I really, really look forward to this being an internal, successful professional development for our faculty. And ultimately our students. Yeah.
Something more that Ann said that is very important about, we're all faculty. We don't like wasting time. We don't like sitting through these sessions that are useless. Hopefully you don't think that about this one, but all these professional developments, we've been in those where it's just a sales pitch or it's just garbage and we're wasting time. And that's how all of us were at these when our task force met before. And as she mentioned, we had some parts where it was like, I can't believe I flew to Reno and I'm sitting here listening to something I don't need. But then we would get together, the 7 of us in a room, and we accomplished so much in a 1-hour breakout meeting because we did exactly what Ann said. We collaborated, we shared, and just to get an understanding that I thought I knew what was going on. I had no idea what was going on at UNR or TMCC or even UNLV at times. And we learned a lot, and then we kind of, we went from there. And that's kind of the goal of all these sessions that, that Ann was talking about, all these upcoming ones. We want them to be pertinent. We want them to not be a waste of your time. And, we hope that you're going to leave out of there saying, that was great. I'm so glad we did this, as opposed to the other thing here. So that's, like I said, that's the real big takeaway I had from all the meetings I've gone and all these sessions is I don't have time to waste. I want to get only the good stuff here. And that's what we hope to give you guys as well. Does anybody have a question? And also, if you saw, I did put an attachment in the chat and I put a Google link there. Just all that is this document right here that we were going over. If you wanted to have this document, which is just a little summary of what's going on. So that's there. But if you have a question, I know everyone's muted, but you can type it in there, or you can just say, I have a question, and we'll unmute you so you can speak it out. Let me know. Serge, is that your hand up there?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. What's up?
Hi. So my question is maybe more for Naya or any other Complete College America representatives that might be here. So back in January, I thought the task force had this beautiful vision. We'd created a framework of courses, the co-requisite courses, 1, 2, and 3 credit models. But then later in the spring, the Nevada System of Higher Education decreed that there has to be a common credit requirement. And it took away all the flexibility that the task force was excited about. And so now all the schools have to offer the same flavor of co-requisite courses in a way that certainly I am no longer very excited about, and it's causing some tension between the schools and trying to force everybody to do the same thing. And I wanted to hear from the CCA perspective. I do understand the wisdom of trying to make things as uniform as possible across the state, but at the same time, there's issues of shared governance where now we don't have the control that we were sold when we dove into this and agreed to try to do this as a system. So can you maybe speak to that, Nia?
It's Nia. So I want to make sure I'm answering your question, because you're asking me whether or not the value in having a uniform system versus flexibility.
That's correct. I mean, do all other states have a rigid structure when they're running these co-requisite models, or do the individual institutions have the flexibility to change it up as they're running their co-requisite courses?
So it really does, and I apologize for this sounding kind of cliche-ish, but it really does depend on the state, because some states say that they want uniformity because of whether it's concerns for having equitable, a similar system, or for being able to track with data and measurement. So many states have the same exact system or same expectations. Then you have some states who are more decentralized, which they might have some guidelines that they want institutions to follow. And as long as you're doing these things and you implement a co-requisite model, it's fine. So it really depends on the system, and the state legislature is usually what drives a lot of the decisions. But James might be able to speak more to what's happening in Nevada, but just as a broadly, it really just, I think the key is trying to figure out, even if you have a statewide expectation or mandate on how this thing needs to happen, whatever it is, then what are the pieces within this standard model that you could adapt in order to fit your institutional culture and needs? And so I think that's when the creativity and innovation really has to work, right? And that's where I think sometimes we can help with trying to figure out. So if you have specific things you're trying to figure out, this is what I was going to do, but now that we have this mandate, it looks like this. Maybe we can identify another institution who's able, or a system that was able to work within those parameters. So we do have that benefit if I have some specifics. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not the co-rec expert on our team. I'm kind of pinch hitting, but I can definitely, if you have a question, go back and find the answer and get it back to James and Patrick and Ann.
But I might be able to field this question. And Serge, I hear you. I mean, we came out of the task force meeting in November. That was the meeting that we all got together, the task force members. I think this was the UNR one. And this was a meeting, and I don't know if Seth is here. Amit, I think I see you were in there, and we had all our, like, everything up on the board. And we were all like, what are you doing? And we had 95X up there, 95D, 96S, like 93T. I mean, all these mess of courses. And that was when we decided we're going to scratch all those and we're going to go to Math 20. We're going to drop the 100, right? And it'll be Math 20. And we agreed to common support numbering. And we agreed to institutional flexibility. And I agree, my heart sunk when it came back that we had to come to common credits, because when we found out this information, it was over the summer. So what ended up happening is that, and I feel you. I mean, I feel you that it kind of changed the dynamic of implementation. So when we came back together, so we all went back to our institutions and we started planning based on the assumption we had this flexibility. Then there was a kind of a miscommunication from where the task force stood to what NSHE interpreted it at. And so when we submitted our draft of Action Plan 1, the Chief Financial Officer, Andrew Klinger, came back and said, you guys can't do that because of the formula funding. So we went round and round and round and round, and this was over the summer. And these were heated conversations. And I wish you were in those too, because we talked a lot. And it came back that our hands were kind of tied by the formula funding. And we were bummed because institutional flexibility was what we really wanted to do. But if it, we kind of then agreed that finally we all came together to figure out, okay, well, we'll start with more and we'll go down to less with 126. And the common credits had to do with the community colleges because of the formula funding, and that it would change the distribution of the pie basically because of we get funding for completers below 100 level classes. But this happened over the summer. So here we are grappling with it as a task force, and we pulled back and we're like, we got to wait for our faculty to come back. So that was one of the loose ends in the first action plan that was multiple discussions that we did feel like we had to come together on. But we put language in the action plan that basically says we want to assess this from not just a curriculum level, not just did it work at your community colleges, but what is also like the financial and staffing and other impacts to the community colleges with this model, right? So we really want to analyze after the implementation all the pieces that go into having these common credits for what is and isn't doable at various institutions. And that's all I have kind of on how historically that came to be. And just kind of like Nia said, it's because of our formula funding. And I even dug into the formula funding. I was like, is there any way that we could change that? But that just seemed like the harder path to get through. So that's where that came to be.
Other questions from anyone? Anything?
That was a great analysis, Anne, on how we're going to look at what we've done and what's working, maybe what needs to be tweaked. But this mandate came from the regents. So what is the criteria that we are trying? What is the regents' criteria that's going to show we've met your mandate and now this is successful, that we don't have to scrap all this work in X number of years? How are we showing them, and what do they want to show this is successful? This is a huge undertaking.
I mean, I can answer a little bit of what my guess on that, because I can't speak for them. I mean, I've kind of learned that we're doing the heavy lift right now in getting the board to be on board and approving what we're doing. And we're going to have to show something substantially the other way if we want to make a change down the road. I haven't heard minimums or numbers of what they want. I'm fairly certain I could bet if we showed that correct doesn't work and the numbers are bad, they're not going to say you're going back to 95 and 96. That I know for sure. They're going to probably say, go back and find another way or find a different correct or a different version. But, where we are right now is no more under 100 and try to get these students done in a year. One semester, if possible, is kind of the main thing. Outcome wise, I don't know how much different it is than a regular course. Like our 181s, if they're doing bad, I have not heard, knock on wood, I haven't heard the board say get rid of 181 and do something different. So I'm not sure. James, I'm sure you might have a better insight on the ground floor there.
I do. Thank you, Patrick, for that. And Gail, it's a brilliant question, right? This is incredibly heavy lift. This is transformational work, and it's undoing decades of traditional remediation, right? Totally hear you and totally appreciate that. What we have done, we have leveraged some of our Strong Start to Finish grant money that INSHE received, and we put it toward hiring a consultant who has spent his life's work in assessing statewide implementation of programming. And we have asked him to develop a very robust assessment plan. We shared that draft plan with the task force. We received ample feedback from the members of the task force. He went back to the drawing board and reframed the assessment plan. And then we incorporated that to part 2 of our implementation action plan that Ann mentioned is going to the board this December. And so rather than wait for the board to tell us what we need to assess, we as a task force are going to the board saying, we recognize that this is our plan for 21 and 22. You have approved an implementation action plan for 21 and 22 academic year. We reserve the right from a continuous improvement lens to make modifications to our plan that we are submitting for 21 and 22 and bring forward to the board based on assessment outcomes, any changes that the task force and the institution see fit. To that point, in part 2 of the action plan that goes to the board again this December, there is a 13-page assessment plan that identifies the very specific metrics by which we will assess the efficacy of this policy and how the institutions were able to negotiate through the implementation. All of those metrics are things that probably are not going to be too much of a surprise to you, Gail, or anyone else, and they certainly weren't to the task force members. Things like course completion with support or without support. Things like upward stream course completion, right? How did I do if I was in a support course, and how did I do in the next chemistry course that required that prerequisite, or 181, for example, right? And then there's also some metrics around persistence from term to term. There's some metrics around completion on time as well, and a myriad of others, right? So we'd be happy to send that assessment plan out to the group immediately following this. You can kind of get a sense of it. But I think the real point I'm trying to make is that we are communicating to the board how we are holding ourselves accountable to ensure that we're testing what we say we're putting out there is going to work or not. And we are also acknowledging the fact that we want to reserve the right, as Patrick just mentioned, to make tweaks to our implementation plans, whether that be in terms of credit amounts or embedded support, anything that we think as a task force is necessary. So I don't know if that answers your question, Gail, but that's sort of where we're at right now.
It's brilliant to move forward, plan forward, to say this is how we're going to assess it. I guess, is there a piece for the board to come back and say, but you forgot, and I am speculating, I don't know how the board thinks, but I'm speculating that there is an economics piece, not just an educational piece, that they are concerned with. We've paid for, math 95 and 96 in high school as taxpayers. Now we're paying for it again at the college and community college level. And so some kind of financial evaluation of how little or more money is coming through, being applied to students in this need. I bring that up only because they have a different perspective than we're all educators. That's a beautiful assessment plan. I'm curious what else they're going to be interested in and haven't potentially articulated, like a financial piece. But brilliant to plan ahead for that.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. I wish I had a crystal ball too to kind of discern what the board might be thinking about. I would encourage you to tune in to the virtual board meeting on December 3rd, where the assessment plan will be presented along with the task force implementation of part 2, and we'll get a sense, kind of where they're at. I will also tell you, speaking of the fiscal impact, that the board is keenly aware of, obviously, the economic situation that faces not only our state, but our higher education institutions. And so the fiscal analysis that Ann alluded to earlier today, in terms of what does the impact on the institution look like fiscally from a human resource standpoint, from a sheer number of faculty standpoint, to reach what would be perceived as full-scale implementation by fall 21, given the current hiring freeze and implications associated with that. We are in the midst of that analysis, and we'll be providing that to the board shortly. We have time, Patrick and Ann, I think, for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. We're getting near the top of the hour.
Sure. Anybody else wondering anything?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if it is still up to the college to keep the 126E or 120E on the college catalog, or is up to the college to keep it, or system-wide, should we just eliminate 126E or 120E as a class code? Did I mention the question clearly? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I can field that one. So institutions, so in essence, they look the same as the 120 plus 20. Each institution is slightly different for example, the universities are able to schedule a 120E, and it's a 3+2 combined class that has a cohort of students that did not make the gateway cutoff and placement, and they're all together in one class, and one instructor teaches kind of both. And I think they're set up as 120E in the catalog using the old expanded notation we used to have for classes, but they keep it. I think UNR is still calling it 120E, but it's a 3+2 single class. So there's no reason to take it out because it is the co-requisite model. Where other institutions like TMCC, for example, we don't have the staffing for one instructor to teach one 3+2 single class. So we have a paired class system with a 120 paired with a 20 paired and separate instructors. So I don't think you have to completely scrap it if that is the model you're using for the co-requisite. So for every institution, it looks like they're either doing the 100 level plus the non-100 level, or the E version of a combined class, but in essence, they're both still co-requisite. Did I answer that correctly?
Let me
Clarify.
see if I understand thoroughly. You meant is 120E would be as a 5 credit, and so is 126E as a 5 credit in UNLV and UNR. Is that correct?
I believe that's no, because everyone's going to, well, there's placement. Amit, you're here. Can you answer what UNR is doing?
So for UNR, for let's say 126E, that's our 3 credit of college level credit for representing 126. And then we have the 2 co-rec credits from Math 26 that go along with that. And like Ann said, the same teacher teaches both. The courses are linked in the schedule. Students sign up for the 126E section, and then admissions automatically puts them in the appropriate 26 section.
So then why the NG system didn't use that concept? The NG system just used like 126 plus 26 or 120 plus 26. Why NG system does not specify that 126E plus 26 or 120E plus 20?
Yeah, let me jump in. That's a great question. And we'll follow up with some more details because we're rounding. I want to be respectful of everybody's time on this hour. But the architecture of the course co-requisite structure, 120 plus 20, is what is absolutely behind the scenes in terms of the registrar's architectural structure of the course setup in PeopleSoft. That will allow the auditing, for auditing purposes, and the funding formula to play out. What the student sees in terms of registering for the co-requisite course is dependent upon the semantics of the institution. So as one institution may require 120E, behind the scenes, that's 20 plus 120, but the student is singly enrolling in 120E, and that's perfectly acceptable. And we can follow up with some more detail in the next session, and certainly in writing before that. But I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I want to thank you all, Patrick and Ann. Thank you for putting this session together, giving the group a good overview at least, and certainly conjured up some good questions that we'll be sure to address as we continue these series. And just as a quick reminder, November 23rd and 24th are our next 2 sessions, first on math co-rec pedagogy and the other on methodology of gateway math placement. And we will be sending out registration links shortly, similarly to how you register for this session. You'll get your Zoom experience. We will record all sessions as well, and we'll let you know where to find those, and you can revisit today's and certainly share it with colleagues who weren't able to attend today. And again, many thanks to Complete College America. Nia, thank you for being here, and our friends at ECMC and Strong Start to Finish for funding this adventure for us. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a good weekend.